Episode 11, Ted Bundy, the man who looked safe. He didn't look like the kind of person you crossed the street to avoid. If anything, he looked like the kind of person you would trust without thinking. Clean-cut. Educated. Polite. The kind of face that belongs on a campaign poster, not on a wanted notice. And that was the first advantage he ever had. He didn't have to force his way into people's lives. Most of the time, the door was already open. To understand why his story still feels unreal, you have to start with the atmosphere of the time. In the early 1970s, many American towns still moved with a certain softness. People left doors unlocked. Students walked across campuses at night with headphones on, thinking mostly about tomorrow's exam, not about whether they'd make it home. The idea of a predator who blended in so perfectly was not a headline yet. It was not part of the cultural reflex. And when a threat doesn't fit the story people already believe, they tend to look away. Ted Bundy didn't begin with a mask. He was the mask. Accounts of his early life are full of contradictions because he was full of contradictions. By the time he was in his 20s, he had already learned how to present the version of himself that would work in any room. He could talk politics. He could talk law. He could talk about the future with enough confidence that people assumed he belonged to it. He volunteered. He showed up. He looked like someone building a life. That's one of the reasons the shock lasted so long. People can understand cruelty when it looks cruel. They struggle when it looks like success. He studied people the way some men study maps. Not to admire them, but to navigate them. He learned what made strangers soften. A friendly smile. A calm voice. A little vulnerability. The easiest way to disarm someone is to make them feel like they are the strong one in the moment. He used that instinct again and again. Someone believes they're helping, and by the time they realize they're not, the situation has already shifted. The first widely recognized wave of disappearances that would later be linked to him began around the Pacific Northwest. Young women vanished in ways that felt almost gentle at first, because there were no obvious scenes. No screaming neighbors. No dramatic evidence. Just absence. A walk that never ended. A dorm room that stayed too quiet. A family waiting for a call that didn't come. When police began looking, they were looking at the wrong picture. They were looking for someone who looked dangerous. Someone unkempt. Someone aggressive. Someone who didn't fit into society. Bundy fit into society like he was made for it. Witnesses later described a man who seemed harmless, even a little awkward. Sometimes he appeared with a cast. Sometimes crutches. Sometimes a sling. He would ask for help carrying something. He would ask for directions. He would position the moment so that the victim's kindness became the bridge between safety and risk. It wasn't a snatch and run. It was a slow shift of control, one polite sentence at a time. The terrifying part, if you look at it closely, is that many of the women who encountered him likely would have described him as normal if you'd stopped them a minute earlier. That is how he operated. He didn't create panic. He avoided it. Panic brings attention. Panic creates witnesses. He wanted the opposite. He wanted quiet cooperation, brief, unthinking, human. As more women disappeared, rumors started to circulate. Not official theories, just the way communities whisper when they sense something wrong but can't name it. On campuses, women began talking about a man named Ted or Theodore, who approached them. Sometimes there were descriptions of a tan Volkswagen Beetle. Sometimes a man with dark hair, good-looking, well-spoken. But the details were inconsistent, and inconsistency is exactly what predators rely on. 100 partial descriptions don't feel like a single person. They feel like noise. Bundy traveled. Not in a dramatic, cinematic sense, more like someone with somewhere to be. He moved between states. He adapted to different environments. And because the investigations were spread across jurisdictions, the picture stayed fragmented longer than it should have. One department didn't necessarily share with the next. One missing persons case didn't automatically connect to another. Today, people assume a database. Back then, it was phone calls, paperwork, and human stubbornness. Eventually, the pieces began to align. A pattern formed, not because the crimes changed, but because the volume became harder to ignore. The concept of a serial offender, someone who killed repeatedly, moving and blending, was becoming part of law enforcement language, but it wasn't fully built into procedure yet. This was still an era where many departments treated each case as its own island. Bundy lived in the water between them. He was arrested the first time because of something mundane, suspicious behavior during a traffic stop. Not a dramatic capture after a chase. Just the kind of small, ordinary moment that becomes historic later. Inside his vehicle, police found items that didn't fit the story of a normal night drive. The discovery didn't immediately solve everything, but it made one thing clear: there was more to him than the surface. Even then, the idea that this man, this clean, articulate, seemingly controlled individual, could be responsible for a long list of disappearances felt too large for many people to accept. It wasn't only denial. It was disbelief. People want evil to announce itself. Bundy didn't announce anything. He smiled. When his legal process began, he did something that would become part of his legend. He inserted himself into the machinery of his own defense. He studied law. He argued. He performed. And that is the right word, performed. Courtrooms are stages. Bundy understood stages. He knew when to be charming, when to be outraged, when to look wounded by accusation. He knew the power of appearing calm while others looked emotional. He knew how to use language as a weapon without raising his voice. At one point, he took advantage of a legal loophole and courtroom procedures to escape custody. That alone should tell you how much he believed in his own ability to outthink the system. Escapes are rarely about brilliance. They're about opportunity and arrogance intersecting at the right time. Bundy had both. He escaped not once, but twice. The first escape happened during a period when he was given enough access and movement that a determined man could exploit it. He ran. He was found again. And when he returned to custody, the system should have tightened into steel. Instead, there were still cracks created by bureaucracy, staffing, assumptions, and the belief that a person already caught will stay caught. The second escape was even more infamous. He was being held in a place that did not anticipate the lengths he would go. Over time, he manipulated conditions, exploited routines, and slipped out again. This was not a magical vanishing. It was a slow, methodical use of negligence. And when he got free, the consequences were immediate and devastating. During the time he was on the run, he made his way across the country. He didn't hide in forests. He hid in plain sight, motels, streets, public spaces. That's what made him so hard to stop. People imagine fugitives as frantic. Bundy could appear calm. He could walk into a store like any other man. He could sit at a table and look like he belonged there. In a world where most people don't expect danger, that is enough. When he reached Florida, the story turned even darker. The crimes attributed to him there were brutal enough that they forced a different kind of national attention. What had been a growing awareness became a jolt. Florida didn't only become another location in a list, it became a turning point in how the public understood the threat. Bundy was eventually caught again after suspicious behavior drew attention, and this time, the system held on to him. The trial that followed became a spectacle. Cameras captured him. People watched. Some watched with horror. Some watched with fascination. And that fascination is part of the uncomfortable truth of why his name stayed alive so long. He was not only a criminal case. He became a cultural event. In court, he continued to treat the process like a stage. He questioned witnesses. He addressed the judge. He used legal jargon. He tried to control the narrative. This wasn't just strategy, it was identity. The idea of being powerless was intolerable to him. He would rather argue from a jail cell than sit quietly in a suit and accept the role of accused. One of the most chilling aspects of his public image was the disconnect between how he looked and what he was accused of. That disconnect made people argue with themselves. Some could not accept it at all. Some tried to rationalize it into something safer, maybe mistaken identity, maybe exaggeration, maybe media hysteria. Because accepting the truth meant accepting that danger does not always come with obvious warning signs. Evidence mounted. Testimony painted a picture. The case against him was strong enough that the trial did not end in ambiguity. He was convicted. Sentenced. And still, even after sentencing, the story didn't stop. It dragged on through appeals and years of waiting, the way big cases often do, slow, procedural, relentless. Behind the scenes, there were also the confessions. Over time, Bundy admitted involvement in numerous murders, though even his confessions were tangled with manipulation. Some investigators believed he used confession as currency, offering fragments in exchange for time, attention, and control over the pacing of his own end. In many cases, families were left with the unbearable position of wanting answers but not wanting to give him what he wanted: relevance. He remained, until the end, a man trying to manage perception. Even execution, something final and absolute, became another arena where he attempted to shape the story. The public watched again. The media documented. People gathered. Some celebrated. Some mourned. Some stood quietly, not sure what justice was supposed to feel like when it arrived this late. He was executed in Florida in 1989. And that should have been the conclusion. But stories like this don't conclude cleanly. They leave residue. Because the real horror isn't only what one man did. It's what his story revealed about systems and assumptions. It revealed how easily a charming presentation can override instinct. It revealed how fragmented investigations can allow patterns to hide in plain sight. It revealed how the public can become consumed by a face, a voice, a myth, until the victims become secondary in the narrative. In the years after his death, his name became shorthand for a specific kind of predator, one who doesn't look like a predator. One who blends. One who uses social expectations as camouflage. And that lesson, uncomfortable as it is, has remained one of the most repeated takeaways from his case. People still ask, how was he able to do it for so long? The answer is not flattering. It's not about supernatural intelligence. It's not about a master plan that no one could have predicted. It's about small failures stacking together, about a world that expects danger to look dangerous, about departments that couldn't easily share information, about witnesses who remembered pieces but couldn't connect them, about a society that hadn't yet trained itself to look at the full picture. And it's about something even simpler, the human tendency to trust what looks familiar. Bundy looked familiar. He looked safe. He looked like someone you could help without risk. He looked like someone who belonged. That's why his story still feels like a warning. Not a warning about a specific man from the past. A warning about the kind of danger that doesn't announce itself. The kind that steps forward politely. The kind that waits for you to reassure yourself. The kind that asks for help. And then, quietly, takes everything.